My family sold my future for $100,000, handing it to my brother to chase a fleeting dream of internet fame. 10 years later, broke and staring down the barrel of bankruptcy, they walked into a meeting to pitch their last hope for salvation to me, the daughter they had discarded like a failed experiment. They had no idea who I was, and I was about to write the final word on our family's story. For me, at 18, my life was charted like a military campaign. Every decision, every hour of lost sleep was a calculated move toward a single objective: Georgetown University. I could already feel the humid Washington, D.C. air, see myself walking past the imposing Healy Hall, a future in diplomacy or international law stretching out before me. I had sacrificed the entire mythology of the American teenager for it. While my friends were at homecoming games and weekend bonfires, I was dissecting political theory in the town library. While they spent summers at the beach, I was pulling double shifts at a greasy diner and volunteering at a legal aid clinic, cramming every single dollar I earned into a savings account that felt more sacred than any church offering plate. My parents, David and Helen, styled themselves as my biggest fans. They treated my early acceptance letter not as my achievement but as their victory lap, a validation of their parenting philosophy. At every neighborhood cookout, my father would puff out his chest and declare, "Our Amelia, she's the one, the first in our line to break into the big leagues." His hand on my shoulder felt less like a gesture of pride and more like he was claiming ownership of a prize racehorse. The day they set a match to my world, the very air in our tidy suburban Chicago home felt wrong, thick and still. I walked in, exhausted from my shift, to see the three of them arranged around our oak dining table. It was a perfect portrait of a brewing disaster. My younger brother Ethan, a 17-year-old whose life's ambition was to become a professional video game streamer, was staring at his hands. My father, David, had that look of a man who has talked himself into believing a catastrophic error in judgment is in fact an act of sheer brilliance. But it was my mother, Helen, whose face betrayed them. Her eyes, normally so steady, refused to meet mine, flitting around the room as if searching for an escape hatch. "Amelia, have a seat," my father began, his voice booming with a counterfeit heartiness. "We have some very exciting news. We're making a major family investment." A low, cold dread began to coil in my stomach. I sat down, my diner uniform still smelling of fried onions. "An investment? Ethan has a truly incredible opportunity," he continued, steamrolling over the palpable tension in the room. "He's on the cusp of something big, building a media empire from his bedroom. He's got the talent, the personality. He just needs a little push, some seed money to get the right equipment and marketing." I looked at Ethan. His media empire consisted of him yelling at a screen while playing video games, with a few dozen followers, most of whom were our cousins. His plan was a fog of buzzwords he'd picked up from online forums. "Okay," I said, my voice carefully neutral. "What does Ethan's gaming career have to do with me?" My mother finally looked at me. A sheen of moisture coated her eyes, a prelude to the emotional waterworks I knew so well. It was her signature move. "Sweetheart," she said, her voice a soft, manipulative caress, "we've had to make a very difficult choice. We're going to use your university fund to back Ethan's business." The sentence didn't compute. It was gibberish, a string of words that made no sense in the reality I inhabited. A strange, sharp bark of a laugh escaped my throat. "I'm sorry, what? That has to be the worst joke I've ever heard." My father's jovial mask cracked and fell away, revealing the cold, hard impatience beneath. "This is not a joke, Amelia. We believe in your brother. This is a chance for our family to build something together. As for your education, you're a smart girl. You can get loans, find scholarships, you're resourceful, you'll figure it out." "Figure it out?" The words came out as a strangled whisper. The shock was hardening into a dense, heavy ball of rage in my gut. "I have spent my entire life working for this. You promised me. That money was the reward for being the daughter you wanted me to be." "And circumstances change," he said, leaning forward as if I were a slow-witted employee. "Sometimes you have to reevaluate your portfolio. You move assets from a low-yield, long-term investment into something with explosive growth potential. It's just smart business." They had the audacity to ask me to be happy for my brother, to understand. They looked at the thousands of hours of my life, the single-minded focus, my one and only dream, and they wrote it off as a bad stock. They cashed me in to bet on a fantasy, on the son who charmed them instead of the daughter who delivered. That night, I didn't waste a single tear. I didn't raise my voice. I moved with a chilling, detached efficiency. I went to my room and pulled a duffel bag from my closet. I left the debate team trophies on the shelf and the framed photos on my desk. I packed only what I had bought with my own money. I folded my Georgetown acceptance letter, now a monument to a dead dream, and slid it into a book. I took the $500 in cash I had stashed away from my diner job. On the pristine white pillow of my bed, I wrote 2 words in black marker: bad investment. Then I walked out the front door, the click of the lock behind me echoing like a gunshot, and I never ever looked back. For the next year, my beat-up Honda Civic was my home. I learned the map of Chicago through its 24-hour laundromats and all-night coffee shops. I learned to sleep in the back of deserted commercial parking lots, jolting awake at the sound of every passing car. I became a ghost. I washed floors as a night shift janitor in sterile downtown office buildings, the silence of the empty cubicles a constant reminder of the world I was locked out of. I served coffee to hungover college students at the University of Chicago. The irony so bitter, it felt like acid in my throat. I was starving, I was freezing, I was lonelier than I ever thought possible. But I was powered by a fuel that was more potent than food or sleep. Pure, unadulterated rage. It was a furnace in my core, and it burned away everything but the will to survive and to win. Georgetown was a memory, but my ambition was a living, breathing creature. I enrolled in a local community college, taking a brutal course load while working 2 jobs. I abandoned political science. It was a field for people who already had power. I switched to data science and financial modeling. I wanted to understand the systems my father so clumsily pretended to master. I wanted to learn the language of capital, not as a pawn, but as a queen. I consumed my coursework. I graduated with an associate's degree, number 1 in my class. It was enough. I applied as a transfer student to the University of Chicago's economics program, the very place I had served coffee. Armed with a stack of academic scholarships and the money I had clawed together, I got in. The next 2 years were a blur of lectures, coding, and sleepless nights. In my final year, from a cramped apartment I shared with 2 other students, I launched my first company. It was a simple app to optimize scheduling for freelance workers. It tanked. My second venture, a platform for small businesses to manage their inventory, also failed, taking my last couple $1,000s with it. But the third idea was different. It was born from the inefficiencies I had witnessed firsthand as a janitor, watching the colossal waste in commercial logistics. I called it Synapse Dynamics. It was a highly complex software platform that used predictive analytics and machine learning to streamline supply chains. It was the opposite of flashy. It was dense, complicated, and solved a problem that cost corporations billions of dollars a year. And it flew. The growth was staggering. Within 18 months, we were signing 8-figure contracts. The same venture capital firms that would have shown me the door just a few years earlier were now flying their partners to Chicago, practically begging to invest. By the time I was 28, my net worth had crossed into the 10-figure territory. The financial press wrote breathless articles about the mystery architect behind Synapse, but I refused all interviews. I permitted no photographs. My public footprint was non-existent. I commanded my empire from a stark, white penthouse office with a panoramic view of Lake Michigan. My anonymity was my shield. It allowed me to work without distraction, but more importantly, it kept me completely invisible to the family who had cast me out. In 10 years, I had not exchanged a single word with them. The chapter of my life that included them was over. The book slammed shut and left to gather dust. Then, on a bleak November afternoon, an email landed in my inbox. It was from the mergers and acquisitions firm I retained to scout potential takeovers. They had a new file. A mid-sized, family-owned logistics company headquartered in the Chicago suburbs was desperately seeking a capital injection to avoid filing for Chapter 11. The company, Pioneer Freight, had been mismanaged into the ground and was bleeding money. I opened the attached prospectus, and there it was: Chief Executive Officer David Miller, board members Helen Miller and Ethan Miller. I leaned back in my leather chair, the silence of the vast office broken only by its soft creak. A laugh escaped my lips. It was not a happy sound. It was dry, sharp, and humorless. The universe, in its infinite and exquisitely cruel wisdom, had gift-wrapped them and placed them on my doorstep. After a decade spent building an unbreachable fortress of success and solitude, they had crawled to the gates begging to be let in. I let the email sit for 4 days. I imagined their growing panic, the frantic phone calls, the sleepless nights as the walls closed in. When my office finally responded, it was through a numbered holding company, an entity so anonymous and bland it was untraceable. We proposed a preliminary meeting. I had to see them. I had to watch them dance for me. The meeting was set for a private boardroom at the Peninsula, Chicago, a hotel so opulent it seemed to hum with the sound of money. I chose my armor for the occasion with surgical precision, not a power dress designed to intimidate, but a custom-tailored charcoal pantsuit, so understated its astronomical price tag would be invisible to them. A simple silk shell, no jewelry, save for a Patek Philippe watch with a plain leather band. I arrived completely alone. They were already there, a sad little island of anxiety in a sea of mahogany and polished chrome. My mother saw me first. A little spasm of confusion crossed her face, a flicker of something she couldn't place. Her features, now etched with the fine lines of chronic stress, turned pale. My father, who looked a lifetime older than I remembered, gave me a brief annoyed glance, as if I were a catering assistant who had wandered into the wrong meeting. And Ethan. At 27, the cocksure swagger was gone, replaced by the slumped shoulders of a man who had discovered that dreams without talent or work ethic have a nasty habit of dissolving. I walked to the head of the table and took a seat, my movements calm and deliberate. I didn't introduce myself, I simply opened a leather portfolio and waited. The silence stretched, becoming a weapon. Finally, my father cleared his throat, forcing a smile that didn't reach his tired eyes. "Good morning," he said, directing his words to the empty space in front of me, as if addressing the holding company itself. "I'm David Miller, CEO of Pioneer Freight. This is my wife Helen and our son Ethan. We're grateful for the opportunity to speak with a representative of your organization." The prospectus was thorough, I said, my voice even and low, a tone I had perfected in 1,000 negotiations. It carried no trace of the girl they once knew. Recognition still hadn't dawned. To them, I was just a face, an obstacle between them and salvation. David launched into his pitch. It was a masterpiece of delusion, a rambling narrative of market misfortunes, unfair competition, and global factors beyond their control. He spoke of Pioneer Freight as a proud family legacy, a pillar of the community, conveniently omitting the fact that he'd only acquired it 6 years ago with a risky loan after Ethan's streaming career predictably imploded, costing them everything. Ethan sat mute, staring at the polished tabletop, the ghost of his failed ambition haunting his features. My mother twisted a handkerchief in her lap, her gaze darting between her husband and me, sensing a predator in the room but not understanding why. I let him talk for a full 10 minutes, letting him exhaust his repertoire of excuses. When he finally wound down, his voice hoarse, I looked up from my portfolio. I let my eyes meet his directly for the first time. "You've painted a picture of bad luck, Mr. Miller," I began, "but my data tells a different story. It tells a story of catastrophic mismanagement, of leveraging company assets to fund a lavish lifestyle, of a failed $100,000 investment in an online media venture 10 years ago that began a decade-long pattern of poor financial decisions." At the mention of the specific sum, a flicker of confusion crossed David's face. Ethan physically flinched as if I had struck him. I continued, my voice as cold and sharp as broken glass. "It tells the story of a company that took on unsustainable debt to chase vanity projects while neglecting its core operations. Your portfolio isn't suffering from bad luck. It's suffering from a bad investor at the helm, an investor who consistently bets on the wrong assets." I paused, letting the words hang in the air. I turned my gaze to my mother. "Don't you agree, Helen?" She looked up, startled, her name on my lips a shocking intimacy. It was then that the first glimmer of horrified recognition finally entered her eyes. Her face went slack, the color draining from it completely. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. I swiveled my chair to face my father again. He was staring at me, his brow furrowed, his mind churning, trying to connect the woman in the brutally expensive suit to a memory he had long since buried. "You talk about assets and portfolios," I said, my voice dropping to a near whisper. "Let me tell you about one of your earliest investment decisions, a long-term, high-yield asset, one with a guaranteed return, a full scholarship to Georgetown, an impeccable academic record, a lifetime of proven performance, an asset you liquidated for a high-risk, zero-return gamble." His face went from confusion to disbelief and then to a mask of pure, sickening dread. His jaw worked silently. He knew. "Hello, Dad," I said. The two words hit him like a physical blow. My mother made a small, strangled sound, a dying animal's cry. Ethan looked up, his face a mess of shame and terror. He looked like he wanted the floor to swallow him whole. My father finally found his voice. It was a weak, cracking thing. "Amelia, it can't be." "It can," I said, rising to my feet. I walked slowly around the table, the quiet clicks of my heels on the marble floor the only sound in the room. I stopped behind him, placing my hands on the back of his chair, mimicking the proprietary gesture he had used on me so many years ago. Circumstances change, don't they? Sometimes you have to reevaluate your portfolio. It's just smart business. I leaned in close to his ear. "I am the representative of the holding company, and I have reviewed your proposal." I walked back to my seat at the head of the table, the seat of power. I looked at the three of them, three shattered remnants of a family I no longer claimed. They were no longer titans of my childhood, just three desperate people drowning in the consequences of their own choices. "Your request for a capital injection is denied," I said, the words crisp and final. "However, my firm is prepared to make an offer. We will acquire all of Pioneer Freight's assets, absorb its debts, and avoid bankruptcy proceedings. We are offering you a one-time payment of $100,000 for the entire company." I let the symmetry of the number sink in. It was the exact price they had put on my future. It was the cost of a dream, theirs and mine. My father stared at me, his face a ruin. "You would do this to your own family?" he whispered. "You stopped being my family the day you cashed in my future," I replied, my voice devoid of all emotion. "This isn't personal. This is just a good investment for me and a very bad one for you. You of all people should understand that. You have 24 hours to accept the offer. After that, my firm will walk away and I'll let the bankruptcy courts pick over what's left." I closed my leather portfolio. I stood up, smoothed down my suit jacket, and walked toward the door without a backward glance. My past was in that room, begging for a future I had no intention of giving them. I had my own, and I had built it from the ashes of the one they had burned.